Okay, we are starting the live stream. I'm so sorry we're starting it really late this time, but it was something that happened to me. But, anyways, thank you for everyone that is going to be watching this live stream. And we are going to talk about H.P. Lovecraft's Reanimator short story. We have already been reading some chapters, and this is the third chapter that we are about to read, which is called Six Shots by Midnight. So right now, Nicholas is going to be again my guest to talk about this. We're going to read it first, and then we're going to start talking. We're going to talk and we're going to discuss about it. But before we start reading this short story or this chapter from the short story, we are going to discuss several, let's say, facts about H.P. Lovecraft before going into the story. So, hello, Nicholas. How are you?
Hey, Pat. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you for being here. So, let's talk a little bit about H.P. Lovecraft. We were just discussing before going into the live stream how different this, let's say, kid, because we're going to state certain facts about him while he was a kid, from other kids, right? So, do you have something special or some fact that you can tell us about him?
Well, I know that when he was young, he really stayed away from other people. And it seems that his mother explained to a neighbor that this was because he had a hideous face. And so he was embarrassed about his appearance. And there was some commentary about that this affected his self-esteem and his relationship with others. So I think that this mother figure in his life was very overbearing.
That was really unfortunate because having someone, especially your mother, telling someone else that you're ugly and that's why you're not coming out, that
Right.
must have been like really hard for him. He also seemed to frequent strange and remote places, just like caves or remote groves, just to make him like to get all of this imagination. And I think that's why it makes him to believe about really strange things. And I think that pushed him to write like the way he did at that time.
Yeah, I think that his life influenced his decisions and his decisions influenced his life. I think that he was greatly influenced by the fact that when he was very young, his father went insane. Later in life, his mother went insane. And I know from my own life that I've looked at my own parents and seen how their lives have changed. And from that, sort of guessed how my life would turn out.
Mhm.
And I think that is a natural thing for a person to do. And so this theme that he seems to have in his stories of going insane, this discovery and going insane being the same thing, may come from that.
Wow. He also seemed to have some sort of he was going through, or he wanted to go, or he wanted to read and write. He wanted to start doing that when he was really young. He was recited poetry at 2, he was reading at 3, and um, writing by the age of 6. And by the age of 8, he was already reading a lot of books that his grandfather gave him because he had this really big library that he was getting the information or the books from. And he was really passionate about a specific genre, which was detective stories. Um, and I think that also helped him to develop all of this interesting way of writing. Do you have something else to mention there?
I've also heard that he was influenced by 1001 Arabian Nights, and that was his inspiration for the Mad Al-Halazar, I think was his name, the
Mm-hmm.
writer of the Necronomicon. Uh, have you read 1001 Arabian Nights?
No, I haven't.
There are a few different versions, but it is just absolutely great fairy tales. and they're a string, and they have a framing device that is really great as well. That is something I would really love to go through with you if you ever wanted to, uh,
Okay.
because it's a series of short stories, and that would be in the public domain as well. Anyway, uh,
That's great.
I think that Lovecraft, it's been cited that he had this idea of the Necronomicon, this fabled, so it's a fictional book that he made up, but it was created in his mythology by this mad Arab. And I think that it's been said that he got this idea from reading 1001 Arabian Nights. So I think he was influenced by reading that as well. And he probably had that in his grandfather's library in his attic.
I guess so, because he had a lot of books. He had a really big private library. That's what it said. Especially that he was studying on his own. So he did not attend school until he was 8 years old. So he had a long time from around 2 years old until 8 years old to be able to read all of those books. And he loved to read.
It is unusual for a boy to be motivated to do that. Girls tend to like reading a lot more, young girls more than
Mhm.
boys, just typically. Boys do like reading things like magazines and fact books, but novels, that's a different thing.
Maybe because he had a really influential um, parent, which was his mother.
Could be.
Could be. Exactly.
Did you say something about poetry? He liked
Yeah, he
reading
loved
poetry?
poetry. Yeah, he was recited poetry around 2 years old.
Oh, well, that's amazing. At 2 years old, some kids are just starting to string together a sentence by then. Yeah, that would be very late, but it does happen.
Exactly. So he
Uh,
was really into reading and writing.
yeah,
He
that's
really
amazing.
loved it. Yes, exactly. So those are the facts that we have from this little child that became like a really good writer, for us at least. I don't know if for all of you will or is, but let us start to read the third chapter. Let me get this. Let me get this here so I can have. Okay, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Okay, can you start, Nicholas, please?
Sure. Okay, here we go.
Mhm.
Chapter 3 6 Shots by Midnight. It is uncommon to fire all 6 shots of a revolver with great suddenness when one would probably be sufficient. But many things in the life of Herbert West were uncommon. It is, for instance, not often that a young physician leaving college is obliged to conceal the principles which guide his selection of a home and office. Yet that was the case with Herbert West. When he and I obtained our degrees at the medical school of Miskatonic University and sought to relieve our poverty by setting up as general practitioners, we took great care not to say we chose our house because it was fairly well isolated and as near as possible to the potter's field.
Reticence such as this is seldom without a cause, nor indeed was ours. For our requirements were those resulting from a life work distinctly unpopular. Outwardly, we were doctors only, but beneath the surface, we were aims of far greater and more terrible moment. For the essence of Herbert West's existence was a quest amid black and forbidding realms of the unknown, in which he hoped to uncover the secret of life and restore to perpetual animation the graveyard's cold clay. Such a quest demands strange materials, among them fresh human bodies. And in order to keep supplied with these indispensable things, one must live quietly and not far from a place of informal interment.
West and I had met in college, and I had been the only one to sympathize with his hideous experiments. Gradually, I had become I had come to be his inseparable assistant, and now that we were out of college, we had to keep together. It was not easy to find a good opening for two doctors in company, but finally, the influence of the university secured us a practice in Bolton, a factory town near Arkham, the seat of the college. The Bolton worsted mills are the largest in the Miskatonic Valley, and their polyglot employees are never popular as patients with the local physicians. We chose our house with the greatest care, seizing at last on a rather run-down cottage near the end of a pond street, 5 numbers from the closest neighbor, and separated from the local potter's field by only a stretch of a meadowland, bisected by a narrow neck of the rather dense forest which lies to the north. The distance was greater than we wished, but we could get no nearer house without going on the other side of the field, wholly out of the factory district. We were not much displeased, however, since there were no people between us and our sinister source of supplies. The walk was a trifle long, but we could haul our silent specimens undisturbed.
Our practice was surprisingly large from the very first, large enough to please most young doctors, and large enough to prove a bore of the burden of to students whose real interest lays elsewhere. The mill hands were of somewhat turbulent inclinations, and besides their natural needs, their frequent clashes and stabbing affrays gave us plenty to do. But what actually absorbed our minds was the secret laboratory we had fit up in the cellar. The laboratory with the long table under the electric lights, where in the small hours of the morning we often injected West's various solutions into the veins of the things we dragged from the potter's field. West was experimenting madly to find something which would start men's vital motions anew after they had been stopped by the thing we call death, but had encountered the most ghastly obstacles. The solution had to be differently compounded for different types. What will serve for guinea pigs will not serve for human beings, and different human specimens required large modifications.
The bodies had to be exceedingly fresh, or the slight decomposition of brain tissue would render perfect reanimation impossible. Indeed, the greatest problem was to get them fresh enough. West had had horrible experiences during his secret college researches with corpses of doubtful vintage. The results of partial or imperfect animation were much more hideous than were the total failures, and we both held fearsome recollections of such things. Ever since our first demoniac session in the deserted farmhouse on Meadow Hill in Arkham, we had felt a brooding menace. And West, though a calm, blonde, blue-eyed scientific automaton in most respects, often confessed to a shuddering sensation of stealthy pursuit. He half felt he was followed, a psychological delusion of shaken nerves enhanced by the undeniable disturbing fact that at least one of our reanimated specimens was still alive, a frightful carnivorous thing in a padded cell at Sefton. Then there was another, our first, whose exact fate we had never learned.
We had fair luck with specimens in Bolton, much better than in Arkham. We had not been settled a week before we got an accident victim on the very night of burial and made it open its eyes with an amazingly rational expression before the solution failed. It had lost an arm. If it had been a perfect body, we might have succeeded better. Between then and the next January, we secured three more: one total failure, one case of marked muscular motion, and one rather shivery thing. It rose of itself and uttered a sound. Then came a period when luck was poor, Interments fell off, and those that did occur were of specimen either too deceased or too maimed for use. We kept track of all of the deaths and their circumstances with systematic care.
One March night, however, we unexpectedly obtained a specimen which did not come from the potter's field. In Bolton, the prevailing spirit of Puritanism had outlawed the sport of boxing, with the usual result. Surreptitious and ill-conducted bouts among the mill workers were common, and occasionally professional talent of low grade was imported. This late winter night there had been such a match, evidently with disastrous results. Since two timorous Poles had come to us with incoherently whispered entreaties to attend to a very secret and desperate case, we followed them to an abandoned barn, where the remnants of a crowd of frightened foreigners were watching a silent black form on the floor.
The match had been between Kid O'Brien, a lubberly and now quaking young youth with a most un-Hibernian hook nose, and Buck Robinson, the Harlem Smoke. The negro had been knocked out, and a moment's examination showed us that he would permanently remain so. He was a loathsome, gorilla-like thing, with abnormally long arms, which I could not help calling for legs, and a face that conjured up thoughts of unspeakable Congo secrets and tom-tom poundings under an eerie moon. The body must have looked even worse in life, but the world holds many ugly things. Fear was upon the whole pitiful crowd, for they did not know what the law would exact of them in the affair were not hushed up, and they were grateful when West, in spite of his involuntary shudders, offered to get rid of the thing quietly, for a purpose I knew too well.
There was bright moonlight over the snowless landscape, but we dressed the thing and carried it home between us through the deserted streets and meadows, as we had carried a similar thing one horrible night in Arkham. We approached the house from the field in the rear, took the specimen in the back door and down the cellar stairs, and prepared it for the usual experiment. Our fear of the police was absurdly great, though we had timed our trip to avoid the solitary patrolman of that section.
The result was really anticlimactic. Ghastly as our prize appeared, it was wholly unresponsive to every solution we injected in its black arm. Solutions prepared from experience with white specimens only. So, as the hour grew dangerously near the dawn, we did as we had done with the others, dragged the thing across the meadows to the neck of the woods near the potter's field, and buried it there in the best sort of grave the frozen ground will furnish. The grave was not very deep, but fully as good as that of the previous specimen, the thing which had risen of itself and uttered a sound. In the light of our dark lanterns, we carefully cover it with leaves and dead vines, fairly certain that the police will never find it in a forest so dim and dense.
The next day, I was increasingly apprehensive about the police, for a patient brought rumors of a suspected fight and death. West had still another source of worry, for he had been called into the afternoon to a case which ended very threateningly. An Italian woman had become hysterical over her missing child, a lad of 5 who had strayed off early in the morning and failed to appear for dinner, and had developed symptoms highly alarming in view of an always weak heart. It was a very foolish hysteria, for the boy had often run away before, but Italian peasants are exceedingly superstitious, and this woman seemed as much harassed by omens as by facts. About 7 o'clock in the evening she had died, and her frantic husband had made a frightful scene in his efforts to kill West, whom he wildly blamed for not saving her life. Friends had held him when he drew a stiletto, but West departed amidst his inhuman shrieks, curses, and oaths of vengeance. In his latest affliction, the fellow seemed to have forgotten his child, who was still missing as the night advanced. There was some talk of searching the woods, but most of the family's friends were busy with the dead woman and the screaming man. Altogether, the nervous strain upon West must have been tremendous. Thoughts of the police and of the mad Italian both weighed heavily.
We retired about 11, but I did not sleep well. Bolton had a surprisingly good police force for so small a town, and I could not help fearing the mess which would ensue if the affair of the night before were ever tracked down. It might mean the end of all our local work, and perhaps prison for both West and me. I did not like those rumors of a fight which were floating about. After the clock had struck 3, the moon shone in my eyes, but I turned over without rising to pull down the shade. Then came the steady rattling at the back door.
I lay still and somewhat dazed, but before long heard West's rap on my door. He was clad in dressing gown and slippers, and had in his hands a revolver and an electric flashlight. From the revolver, I knew that he was thinking more of the crazed Italian than of the police.
We'd better both go, he whispered. I wouldn't do not to answer it anyway, and it may be a patient. It will be like one of those fools to try the back door.
So we both went down the stairs on tiptoe, with a fear partly justified, and partly that which comes only from the soul of the weird small hours. The rattling continued, growing somewhat louder. When we reached the door, I cautiously unbolted it and threw it open, and as the moon streamed revealingly down on the form silhouetted there, West did a peculiar thing. Despite the obvious danger of attracting notice and bringing down on our heads the dreaded police investigation, a thing which, after all, was mercifully averted by the relative isolation of our cottage, my friend suddenly, excitedly, and unnecessarily emptied all 6 chambers of his revolver into the nocturnal visitor.
For that visitor was neither Italian nor policeman. Looming hideously against the spectral moon was a gigantic misshapen thing, not to be imagined save in nightmares, a glassy-eyed, ink-blacked apparition, nearly of all fours, covered with bits of mold, leaves, and vines, full with caked blood, and having between its glistening teeth the snow-white, terrible, cylindrical object terminating in a tiny hand.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so I think that's
Wow.
excellent work. Yeah, it's amazing he only got paid $5 for that chapter.
Yeah, but this chapter was something.
It
This
was. It
chapter
was
was
very
something.
it was very descriptive. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I could definitely bring that he was. I mean, I think because of the time that was reading this,
Hmm.
um, he really marked the black and the white.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he was commenting on, this person didn't have an Irish-like nose. He's talking about the person as the black guy is having almost forelimbs. He couldn't avoid calling them forelimbs.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it was definitely. I could see a non-racist just describing a person like that, but definitely knowing from the background that he was a racist, you definitely see that played out here.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't understand that last part. Do you think like the last, I mean, this creature that was in front of him was the black guy?
I think it must be, but it's obviously been transformed by the concoction that they gave it. What the concoction that they gave it was made for Caucasians. I think that was one of the ideas, that different specimens required different versions of the agent,
Mm-hmm.
and they couldn't get this one to do anything, so they buried it, and it's described as ink black apparition. So I'm guessing, and nearly on all fours. And it was described earlier that the black guy had really long arms,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost like four legs. And so I think that that's what we're describing here. But obviously, he's been transformed because we see that between its glistening teeth, a snow white, terrible cylindrical object terminating in a tiny hand. That it,
That's terrible.
yeah.
That's just imagining that it was this little kid that was being murdered by this
So is that what it
thing.
was? That was what I was wondering, because it was.
Yes.
Is it still got the kid's arm in its mouth, or is
Yes.
this okay? Because I thought that it was something that was transformed. I thought it was so unlikely that okay, so they buried it near their cottage. The boy
Yeah,
with
they left
lewds.
it there. They
Okay,
thought it was not going to come back to life, and that's why the little kid just ran off. He got missing. He never came for dinner, and supposedly he usually come back, and he never came back. So I am guessing that he got lost in the woods. This thing was already searching for food. He catch the eye on the kid. He started to chase him. He got him. He killed him. And I
no, I gotta disagree. Cylindrical object. He would say arm if it was an arm.
but he
Cylindrical
said
object is something else.
but he said a cylindrical object terminating in a tiny hand.
That's right. Yeah, and
So
so I
it's like
don't think that's an arm. Like,
it's
what's
like
this
telling me
cylindrical
the
object?
elbow. It's like telling me that it's the elbow
Okay,
onto the
I don't
hand.
think he would describe it that way. I think that this is some sort of a mutation or something that has happened from the concoction.
Because he says like why I bring this, because he's saying, and having between its glistening teeth as snow white. Snow white will be like the color of the skin. I mean, the color of this boy
I
skin.
could see that. Yep, yep.
I'm just saying. I mean, I
I
it's
could
the
see Snow White describing that, but the thing is, Snow White could describe a lot of things, and cylindrical object just does not seem to fit with an arm.
maybe it's because it's between his teeth, and that's why they couldn't see it very well because it was at night, and the only thing that they could see that was coming like from one side of his mouth, or this thing's mouth, was the hand.
You argue well, and I haven't read ahead, so I don't know.
No,
But I just
I
don't read
haven't
it.
read it. I'm
Okay,
definitely
I don't read it that way though.
of
So
course,
yeah, we'll
of
have
course,
to.
but yeah, we'll have to keep on reading later to see what was going on. But the thing is that we actually don't know, and we cannot debate what is this awful thing that it's standing there. And okay, let's forget about what he had in his mouth, or in its mouth. Let's think about um this thing coming back to Wes and this guy's place. Why
Right,
do you think this guy will be back in this house? I mean, to this house.
and he knows to use the door.
Yeah.
Uh, I just generally expect that this thing means them ill, that it's upset about what they've done to it, and it's coming to take revenge. That's the general feeling I just get from all the interactions with these sort of forbidden creatures in Lovecraft's realm. Is it seems like they really don't want to be bothered. They don't want you to do things. They try to go back to what they're doing, and if you get too involved with them, it turns out poorly for you.
Yeah. I mean, but what I felt and how they described the creature, because they didn't say anything about this creature dying after West
No,
shots all of that, right?
no.
And it seems like it didn't make any sound. It didn't
Yeah,
move.
you'd expect some sort of a description of an undescribably horrible scream or inhuman scream or something like that.
Exactly.
But there was
So
nothing like that. Yeah.
exactly. And there, the thing is that this thing is calm. It's calm. It's there. It's standing there, like just there, just being there. And why would I bring this up? Because I feel that the author is um, portraying this thing as a pet or something that it's being controlled. So it's coming back to where he started,
Oh,
where
I
he was born,
definitely
let's
did
say.
not get that. The film that we watched had
Uh,
that,
mm-hmm.
where they could control the undead to a certain extent. Uh, did you see the chapter title of the next chapter?
The Scream of the Dead.
Yeah. So we were just talking about how there's no description of the scream yet, but I guess there. I guess
Yeah.
it did scream.
Well, we will have to read later, but I don't know if
Right.
it's referring to something else. Um, but the thing is that in this last paragraph, or these two last paragraphs, they never mentioned that. So it made me feel that it was like a pet coming back, and this pet was bringing something to his owner, forgetting,
Oh,
yeah,
right,
forgetting
like a
about.
bone or something, right?
Exactly. So forgetting about if it was the kid or if he had something like building his mouth or whatever, but it seems like he portrayed like it was a pet coming back to his owner. That's what I felt when I read those lines. So that's why it didn't. I mean, the last bit when he said when the author said terminating in a tiny hand, that like made me shiver, but it didn't make me to feel repulsed by it. It just
Oh,
made me
really?
feel that it was, yeah, it just made me feel like it is a pet. It refers as a pet. But
I
anyways,
I
hmm,
find hands to be especially gross because they represent humanity so much. They're so uniquely human hands that
yeah,
if you see a dismembered hand, it's a lot more disturbing to me than seeing like a dismembered, I don't know, uh, back or something, like
hmm,
something that you couldn't really see what it is. Like the face, the hands, those are very identifiably human. And so this bizarre creature having a human hand where he should not have a human hand, that just seems so perverse to me.
yeah. Okay, let me check. There is another part that I wanted to mention. There was like I think in the first part
Okay.
of this
Well,
chapter.
since we were just talking about the very end, I'll just say I really like the lead up in that he can't sleep, and so we've got a boring scene, and then
Mm-hmm,
we have the first sort of suggestion of fear, which is the rattling at the back door, and
mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden we have Wes rap at my door. I would have liked to have seen different language there and seen and heard the door first before knowing it was West. I think that would have been interesting to have the knock outside and then the knock at your door. That would have been scary. But then he had the gun, and then they tiptoe down, and I really like the build up to the suspense at that last moment. And this is all to the thing that we already knew about from the very beginning, which is what you're about to talk about. But it begins with these 6 shots by midnight, which I I just realized is a bad title because he says at 3 later, right?
I
Uh,
think no. He said that he emptied all of the six.
no, but we retired about 11.
Uh huh.
Uh, After the clock had struck 3.
Ah, okay.
Lovecraft
Well,
screwed up his timeline. That's hilarious.
well, maybe he was trying to get I don't know, he was trying to resemble midnight, when you pass midnight, you have all of these creatures coming out. So maybe that was he was referring to that, not exactly the time.
I take 6 shots by midnight to mean before that time. So if I say I'll meet you by
Okay.
10, I would take that to mean I will see you at 10 o'clock or before 10 o'clock. I will not be later than 10 o'clock. And so perhaps he meant it in a different way, but I assumed the
Ah,
title 6 shots by midnight meant that by the time you hit midnight, you had 6 shots.
Okay. Okay. Well, it seems like maybe he wants to try to clickbait us.
Midnight is a powerful time. It's a great time for stories, but I would
Exactly.
have. It's weird that he has 3 o'clock later, unless he didn't mean that, or that it just didn't. I really think that it's likely he named this title, like he named this chapter before he wrote the chapter, and he just missed that timeline. In my own writing, I've had to go back and forth and check timelines and facts because it's an imaginary world. It's easy to get it confused.
Yeah, or maybe he wanted to relate that to something else in the story that has to do with midnight. Might be. Okay. Mm, there was a part where the one that it's talking, it's mentioning about how psychotic or the psychological disturbance that West had by remember all of the specimens that they did or they created. I wanted to search for that bit. Oh, where was it? That he was disturbed by the creations that they already did here.
Yeah, he has
This
felt that he was
was,
followed, a
yeah, the
psychological delusion.
psychological illusion. Yeah. So the thing is that all of them except two were alive. So this is what we were talking about before, remember? And what you said that even though they have created this thing or they have created those things that are still like moving, it's not like the typical storyline that we have now for zombies that if someone gets infected, everyone will get infected. So it's just like one creature that is
It's
already around.
Yeah, they have to directly do the work in order to raise these things. That's right.
Exactly. But still, even though it's not transmitted to another human being or to another living thing, he still have this psychological delusion that someone is following him.
Well, I think that that is the narrator playing with us a little bit, in that the author wants us to question whether or not this guy is really being chased. And I think he is really being chased. Um, and even if he's not, like the feeling that you're being chased is almost scarier than
Hmm.
knowing you are being chased, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I think that's what Lovecraft is going for here.
And also not to forget about them because they are not being told. I mean, they are
Right.
already around and we don't know what's going on with them.
It is an effective way to give us a summary of what has happened in the story and make it relevant to what's going on in the story now.
Exactly. It's just to remember, hey, you have done this. It's still around.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I just again I'm really impressed with this story. I In a lot of ways I do feel it's kind of amateurish in its writing, but in a lot of the design I find it very interesting. And I like how it's just out there and just boom, you get the story. There's not a lot of dancing around, but I did notice that there was more alliteration or close to alliteration in this chapter. Did you notice that? That a lot of the sentences had words that began with the same sounds or the same letters?
um not actually, but I think it was I felt that it was easier for me to read it than the other two chapters.
Oh, okay.
So maybe it was that because it just like sounded more, I don't know, it follows through for me.
Yeah.
Let me see what else. The other thing that was interesting was about them investigating the place where they were going to set up their eh, so-called laboratory, which was really close to the cemetery.
But Potter's Field, especially, yeah.
Yeah, because they was like acting almost like thieves. They're just
Well,
thinking
they're grave
how to,
robbers, yeah.
exactly, exactly. So they needed to like figure it out how to do it without alarming anyone.
Yeah.
And what we were talking about before about um, the potions that they were using. At least in here, they were mentioning that they were using different kind of potions because it depends on the specimen. And I'm guessing that it will be if it's bigger or if it's smaller, it will need certain amounts.
I imagine the amounts will be different, but I also think that the things that they're giving it are slightly different as well. I think that's why they didn't get the effects they expected with the Harlem Smoke.
Yeah. What else?
I think that something that might be lost to us now in the 21st century that may have been a little bit more present in the age that Lovecraft was writing this is that hundreds of years ago, it was considered improper to be dealing with dead bodies. And the way that doctors generally get their training is working
Mm-hmm.
with corpses, cadavers is what they call them.
Mm-hmm.
And so this idea of a scientist dabbling in these forbidden researches and stealing away dead bodies. This does play off an old thing that has existed for hundreds of years, right? Like in
Mm-hmm.
the 1500s or something like this. This probably really did happen in terms of people stealing bodies from graveyards in order to study them.
Well, that was happening. I mean, just to get away from the story and telling something that was happening here, for instance, we have um, one of the stories that we have here. It's that people that had restaurants that were giving soups for people and they were selling soups for people were using um, human bones in their soups
Oh,
to make people come back. And that's a really like well-known myths here, like a legend, let's say. And the other part was that the doctors were taking bones from the morgues to investigate them and to keep them at home. So,
oh,
so the dead person that they had in their house were taking. I mean, they were like their what's they called um like their garden for the house. So I mean, the people that were taking those bones were thinking, okay, I will have a guardian for my house.
interesting.
Yeah, I have had certain like really like late family members. I think they called. I mean, the ones that I don't know. My great great grandfather or grandmother that was a doctor, and they were saving bones, what they were investigating and studying, and they said that they had ghosts in their houses because of that, and that was
Oh,
passing
interesting.
for generations. And the last generation, which was one of my aunties that had bones in my grandma's house, they said that they had like a couple of ghosts going around, but it was because they have like in this big I don't know, bookshelf, they had some bones like on top of it. And that's what I have heard about those things, and that's really scary.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's the idea of there being ghosts there is related to the idea that the bones shouldn't be there? Like, do ghosts hang out in graveyards, or are they just upset about being on a bookshelf that they're haunting that house?
I don't know, maybe the way that they passed and the way that they were got out of I don't know, from where they were, and I actually don't know. I mean, I don't even want to think about having any bones in my house. That's for sure. Yeah.
It is a weird thing. I remember when I was a kid, I went to my father's boss's house, and he had a skull, and I think it was some ancient man skull, and that was why he had it. Was this was an archaeological find? But to me, as
Oh,
a child, I was just like, "That's somebody's skull." And you have it on in a case in your living room. That's strange.
yeah. I mean, that would be scary.
I thought it was a strange treatment of a part of a dead body. There's something that seems out of place to me about that, in that it's being displayed.
Uh huh. Oh no, but I don't know if you want to have like an archaeological finder, like it was like I don't know, a skeleton in your living room. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if I will have that.
yeah. I think a lot of people would be impressed with the status of it, but it seems like an odd thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
I could get down with there being like an arrowhead or an axe or something. That would make a lot of sense. Be like, hey, look at this axe that is 2,000 years old or something. But somebody's
Yeah.
skull is weird.
Mm. Yeah, that would be like really odd to have all of that there, and having something like small will be okay for me, but nothing that has to do with a dead person.
Yeah.
What else? What else can we have here? Oh, by the way, what do you think about this Italian woman's death? Do you think West did it on purpose or that he couldn't save her at all?
Oh, I didn't take it as Wes doing it on purpose at all. I thought, especially back in this time, this thing would have been a little bit more common in that you can have a panic attack and die. And I think that's what's being described here. She's just so, she has a weak heart, and she's so stressed out about her missing son that she dies.
Yeah, he
Uh,
got like a full heart attack, and that's what usually happen when you have, I don't know how it's called, but you have something called like a full heart attack, and even they try to resuscitate you, it won't matter because they won't do it. I mean, the
yeah,
doctors cannot help you.
yeah, that's how I took it. I didn't take this. I just took this as a part of Wes doing his job. Wes didn't seem to be bothered by it at all, but I wouldn't expect a doctor to be bothered by this. It sounds like something that would be fairly common in their work.
Why would you think that the author will bring this to the story?
Uh, that the idea that there is this other thing that is not the police that could be after them, and so that makes more sense that he takes the revolver to the door. I think that would be one reason. Uh, I think just piling on the things to be scared about and concerned about makes sense as well.
No, okay.
And I think that probably for Lovecraft, them being Italian, probably there's something going on there as well. He talks about Italian peasants are exceedingly superstitious, and
Hmm.
so I wonder if he has certain opinions himself. But I base that on comments that I've heard about Lovecraft outside of this, so that would be outside context that I'm bringing into the story, not something I'm necessarily reading here.
Yeah, but I wonder why he meant by that. Being superstitious about what?
Oh, well, she was being harassed by omens, and I thought that was interesting, in that maybe there are really things that these scientists are blind to. Maybe they're doing these horrible, inhuman acts to these corpses, and
Hmm.
there are signs around them that this superstitious Italian peasant is discovering and seeing around them, and she is actually freaking out about them. Maybe they're just oblivious to it. I considered that, but I think the idea is that she's just really concerned about this,
Mm,
and it's a scary, spooky situation.
okay. What else? What else?
And maybe the fact that she's an Italian peasant makes it more believable that the husband goes after West with a stiletto.
Mm-hmm. You think?
For Lovecraft, at least, yeah. I think it might. If you're asking for reasons why Lovecraft put this in the story, I think those might be 3 reasons.
Okay. Okay, I'm was trying to think about why they will bring all of that here, but I think your point is valid. Mm.
It's a little bit hilarious that they're doing all this research that they hope to become famous as scientists for, and yet
Mm-hmm.
they're doing it in secrecy. So like they can't let anybody know about it until they let everybody know about it.
Well, you won't want to tell them that you have failed 1,000 times. You
Yeah.
want to tell them around that first time. Let's say first time because it's not the first time, but let's say the first time that they did something right, not the 1,000 times that they failed, I
Yeah.
think. Hmm. That's interesting because that means that they will have to fail over and over again to find the perfect solution.
Oh, I take this tiny hand to be a representation that this is not getting better; it's getting worse.
I mean, you meant the for the last paragraph.
Yeah, the way that this thing has been transformed, I really don't think they're perfecting the process. I think that they're getting more results, and that the more results you get with this process, is the worse you get. More unnatural things become.
Okay, so instead of thinking that they are doing the best, they are just going backwards.
I think, in a sense, yeah. I think to succeed at this would be to create a horrible monster, where they think that they're reanimating the dead, but what they're doing is they're just taking corpses and transforming them into monsters.
I wonder if this is one of the monsters that it's on H.P. Lovecraft's mind because he is like from scratch creating a monster.
It is a weird one, yeah. I am not aware of any mythology that has an arm coming out of, or a cylindrical object with a tiny hand coming out of the mouth. Uh, like I know about a lot of mythologies that have multiple arms, and I know about this one sea monster that has a tail as a hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a scary Mayan thing, or Maya thing, I guess it would be, uh, where uh, the it's basically a serpent. It's like a snake,
Mm-hmm.
and it swims in the ocean. But on its tail, it has an arm with a hand, a human hand, and so it waves its tail above the water to mimic a person that's drowning, to lure
Mm-hmm.
people in, and I think it eats their eyes.
Oh.
Yeah, it's this horrible monster, but nothing that has a hand coming out of the mouth. Like the thing that I thought of was Alien. It's got the
Mm-hmm.
mouth that comes out of the mouth, and it
Okay.
comes out on sort of a cylindrical object. It's got kind of an arm that comes out.
But that will be like I don't know, it that small time to have something developed for
It
this.
is strange how much has changed. Yeah, because this ostensibly has only been a couple of hours. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So it's not that clear. And it doesn't seem to be clear if they also were experimenting with this thing before they left it or they buried it, right? Because this could have been the execution by West, doing something to this thing just to try it. I mean, just to test it, because it's not. It's just saying that they're putting some potion, but they are not saying that they are experimenting with it, like
Right. Have
giving
not.
more lips or.
Yeah, they definitely haven't described any surgery or anything like that. I think that would be a jump to assume that West has put this in there, and especially because they worked together to bury this thing. I think we would have expected some mention of West adding this.
Yeah, especially because they have lots of corpse that they were using. They might have had something there that they wanted to experiment with. If they, I mean, if the author will start talking about this peculiar monster that they have in the door, like in front of them.
Yeah, it's
But I think
I'd be
overall,
frustrated. Go ahead. Go ahead.
mhm. No, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say I'd be frustrated reading this in magazines separated. I would be like,
Mhm.
no, no, tell me what happens next. I'd be angry. Don't split it
And
up
then
too much.
I will have to wait for like the next week or the next month to have like this the next chapter.
Probably several months. Yeah, this story, even though it's only 6 parts, was published over a course of like a year or two, right?
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I think it was
That's
like
that's way
21,
too
22
much.
or something like that. Yeah.
Wow, that's way too much. Imagine just to be waiting, like, okay, I just read the chapter. What's going on? I
Yeah,
have to wait like for 4 months to have it.
it's like the old Star Wars. This is the original Star Wars, where you have to wait like 2 years for a movie to come out.
But this is like way worse because this is like only like, let's say, 7 or 8 paragraphs. At least you have a story that you can go into, which is like, I don't know, 1 hour and a half or 2 hours for a movie.
Right,
In
yeah.
here, well, you have your imagination. That's why we're here. We're talking, and we can still be getting different parts of the story, but we actually don't know. We are just thinking that it might be, but we don't
Sure.
have the whole story.
Yep. Yeah, I would want a little bit more. This cliffhanger of the hand, I think it's an effective cliffhanger, but I would I would want this story to be described a little bit more. I would like to know the next things that are going to happen
Yeah,
for me to be satisfied. Go ahead.
and just to make it for what we started this short story. By the way, this has nothing to do with the movie. Nothing to do with the movie. At least not that I have found anything to relate to it.
Yeah, well, there's those other two movies as well. There's Beyond Reanimator and Bride of Reanimator, right?
But
Uh,
I don't think Bride of the Reanimator will actually fit in this.
Perhaps not. I don't know, but that film happens in a very short time while they're at Miskatonic University,
Mhm.
and the story is different actually with Dr. Halsey
Uh-huh.
because he's the guy that gets put into the asylum in the film. Um, and in this, he's the hero that fights against the plague of typhoid. Uh,
Exactly. So they're
yeah,
like two different characters, even though it's
yeah,
just one of them.
that's right. Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly. And I think the Bride of the Reanimator will have to focus on the girl. And in this case, in any of the chapters that we have already read, have um, have a lady in it, or at least a lady that it's being with the person that it's telling the story.
That's right. We haven't had any character like that, and I would be surprised if Lovecraft really wrote a character like that. We'll see. I think we'll read this and we'll read other things, but I'd be surprised to see a strong female lead in any of his stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a resource that was used at that time because having a story without a woman at that time, I guess it was a little bit boring. I don't know.
Oh, I think that actress
I
added a
mean,
lot of
I'm
interest
talking
for
about the
that
movie, by
film.
the way.
Yeah, yeah, for the film, I think that actress added a lot. She was a really talented actress, but also, like I counted 3 times that they exposed her breasts in the film. So, I think, yeah, for a lot of science fiction lovers, it probably added a lot of interest to the film.
Yeah, especially because they are like the weak, I mean, the weak part of the story, which is a woman at that time, right? And she was showing the breasts. So those two things. What else? I don't know. Do you have something else that you want to bring from this chapter? Something that I don't know catch your eyes?
It is interesting the condescension he has for Puritanism and these foreigners when it's actually like the worst characters in the story are without a doubt Herbert West and his assistant, the narrator. The things that they're
Hmm.
doing are beyond the pale of horrible, and yet the narrator just really looks lowly on everybody else. Like, they really look down on everyone else. That's interesting.
Maybe that was a that maybe that was a way to, I don't know, having like a small dark joke.
Maybe
Maybe
it is
because
it is
you
ironic.
have the bad. Yeah, exactly. You have the bad people of the story, but then it's been reflected to someone else or to something else instead of them.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else to say other than I really like how compact it is. It's again, these short stories are very impressive to me in that you can have a very interesting story in a short amount of time, where you don't have to have these long
Exactly.
epics. Yeah,
And the thing is that we can try and imagine different things even though it's not been said here in the story, but we can still debate, right? There are things
sure,
that are said there, but we actually don't know what's going to happen, and we don't actually know if there if the author is going to bring it in the next chapter. For example,
that's
that
right.
last creature that appeared in front of them, we actually don't know what's going to happen, but it's something that will keep us there, like with the story, and wanted to know what's going to happen next.
Yeah, he better pay off on that because I'll be upset if we don't hear more about that creature that they just shot 6 times that this whole chapter seemed to be about. If they just move
Yeah,
on and
just
they're
let
like,
me.
oh, okay, then we buried it again.
Well, it will be just like the first one that got burned, and that's what we thought or we think it is, and the other one that just got lost and was like using his or its claws to get back to its grave, and
Right.
we actually don't know what happened to it because
Okay, you think
we
it's
don't
gonna be
know,
like
right?
that? Sure.
It might be. I mean, we don't even actually know if he's been killed or it's been killed, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if in the last chapter, um, Lovecraft will say something about all of the monsters or all of the specimens that are still alive. Like what happened to them? Or that's going to be like left in the dark for us to have that for our entire life.
And to this day, guards at Miskatonic University warn of terrible inhuman screeches in the darkness and trails of blood. Yeah, I get that would be an interesting cliffhanger.
Exactly. I mean, we won't know. But you know what? Even if I can say that the movie at that time was really good by the time, I mean, by that time, I don't think it gives the story the best shot that they could give. I think they could use so much resources from here.
Oh yeah, I think like I enjoyed the film, but that was it took this story very loosely as inspiration. I think you could tell a lot of very interesting stories from this material. Yeah, I don't think I don't even really think of that film as a Lovecraft film. I would think that a Lovecraft film would be a lot more eerie, where that
Mm-hmm.
one is disturbing, especially in the violence and the reanimation of things that are violently wounded. But uh, it's not an eerie film. It's more freaky and exciting. It's got violence and it's got sex and it's got danger and it's got uh, hokey science. Whereas this is really creepy. They're doing things they shouldn't be doing. They're going around, and if anybody knew what they were doing, they would basically burn them at the stake. And the more that they do, the more things they're leaving, like ends they're leaving untied, where things are going to catch up with them. And it's come to their back door this time. But we already know that Herbert West goes missing.
Yeah, and I don't know. I wouldn't even let. I don't know how to explain this, but what I feel is that the director of the movie shouldn't even have got this story to go into a movie, because he's not even taken anything. I mean, he's just taken the two characters, the the benevolent doctor.
The narrator and the doctor Dean Kane or whatever his name is from the film.
Mhm.
I think they're very different. This guy is in the story. The narrator is
Exactly.
really on board with this, whereas uh, they're not really close friends in the film, and he's sort of being dragged along against his will for a lot of it. Uh, Whereas, yeah, I think this is very different. They take the name Herbert West and sort of his obsession with this, and they take the idea of the reagent, but much of it is different.
Exactly. It's definitely different. I don't understand why they. I mean, maybe they couldn't get enough for the time that they were publishing, or they were like presenting this movie. I don't know. It might have been that, and that's why they couldn't bring this kind of movie.
The prominence of the sort of gore effects and things in that film
Mm-hmm.
makes me think that the director was probably involved with the writing of it. I've never looked it up, but and I think that he would be wanting to showcase that sort of stuff. So he probably had ideas of shots that he wanted, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that was probably more of the motivation for the film. And for the other one, that From Beyond that we watched, he probably had these ideas of these images that he wanted to portray on the screen. I imagine he wrote a story around that.
Yeah, but still, you have so much here that you can present. I mean, I would have loved to see this last creature in front of the two characters and see how they will act, or to see the claws in the grave in a movie.
Sure, yeah, yeah. I
You know,
think again, I think a really interesting story. I just really like what they did with the film. I don't think that the film is a replacement for this story at all. But
no, of
I
course not.
but I take it as sort of inspired by these basic ideas, and I like that. But yeah, I'd be interested in seeing a presentation of this story on film, a little bit more truer to the work, the content. It
And
would be very
I'm
creepy.
glad that we. Uh huh. Yeah, but you know what? I'm glad that we watched the movie first. And you know why? Because it didn't have like enough elements. I will have been so disappointed to read this and to go and watch a movie that couldn't bring me to what I'm feeling with the chapters,
Right. I can understand that. Yeah.
right? Because we are coming from a place that we are interested in of knowing what was the background of the story itself in the movie. But now we are realizing that it's a completely different story. And we're getting so much from these chapters than from what we were watching in the movie. Right. So
Yeah.
I am feeling that I'm getting more from reading this than actually watching the movie. But I'm glad that we decided to read this, to
Yeah,
be honest.
I definitely get
I'm
what you're
really.
saying. Yeah. Yeah. I like them on different levels. Just that character of the Herbert West
Yeah.
in the film, I really enjoy.
But yeah, but you know what? In this particular chapter, he wasn't being mentioned too much.
No.
He wasn't being mentioned too much. He was mentioned when they were doing um well when the that's one part that he was mentioned there. And when they went to check on the match with these two people that and the Harlem smoke and with the Italian.
Right.
But he didn't interact until the last two paragraphs, and that's it. Well, the last three paragraphs, let's say, and that's it.
Yeah, whereas in the film, Herbert West is the main motivator of all the horrible things that happen in the story. In this, he just seems to be one of the two characters that are doing along. This narrator seems to be assisting him and going along with all of these things, and in as much danger uh, as Herbert West.
Yeah, but the thing is that it seems like these two have, well, in this case, the narrator has his mind on his of his own, and he's not like exactly following West's footsteps. I don't know if
Well,
some.
except at the beginning of the story, in I think chapter one, uh, says, "I was his closest companion. Now that he is gone and the spell is broken, the actual fear is greater."
Mm-hmm.
And so the spell, I'm guessing, is a kind of sort of power that he has over him in his presence. That was something that definitely existed in the film. Is the I forget what that doctor's name was, but the evil doctor that gets his head cut off.
Yeah.
He has got a spell. He has. Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Just a second.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. He
Mm-hmm.
seems to have a sort of power over people where he can command them, and at the end of the film, he can command the undead.
But
Uh,
but do you think that that was a resource that was used in a different way than the story it's portraying? Like,
it's totally different than this story, yeah.
because it was
But
Herbert West that had the, let's say, power
in this story, yeah, yeah.
story. But in the movie, Herbert West had a certain power into Crane, I think it was, or the other person or the other doctor that was with him. But this other.
No, no, he didn't. He was actually sort of controlled by the doctor that he ends up
No, no,
cutting
no,
off
no,
his
no.
head.
I know, but the thing is that Herbert West was imposing his, in quotes, spell onto this guy that was dating this girl.
In a sense, yeah,
Only
he is manipulating him. Yeah, there's
exactly, he was manipulating him. I'm sorry, but this other doctor really had a spell on Herbert West.
right.
That was where the real spell started.
Yeah, yeah, and he does it with a couple of the other characters as well. And then at the end, he's controlling all the undead, which seems to be a spell. And even just the idea that his decapitated head can
Hmm.
control his body, that seems to be magical in some way because there's no physical connection there, right?
Yes, exactly. Hmm. I wonder what was the motivations of the director to do that kind of stuff.
I think he just thought it would be interesting and exciting, and he's like, "Oh, wouldn't it be cool to have this guy walking around with this decapitated head scaring people?"
It could be. It could be. I mean, I wonder why it didn't got the movie like getting more resources. I'm still debating if it was because he thought, or the people that was creating this thought that they wouldn't be getting enough audience if they try to follow through these chapters,
Yeah,
or they.
I think they tried to make it more interesting, and they expected. I'm guessing that they expected that most people wouldn't have read this story. They probably wouldn't be familiar with the story. I
Mhm.
think that they were loosely taking it and just making it an interesting movie. I don't think it was meant to be a production of Lovecraft's work. I think they were just honoring him by keeping the name.
Oh, that's really sad. That's really sad. I mean, I would have loved to see that, to be honest. I wonder if someone will ever try to get these stories for a movie, like for a new movie.
It seems like people are so obsessed with remaking the past that I would expect it's inevitable. And
Hmm.
Lovecraft really does have a cult following. Some people are really crazy about him. And so I expect that at some point it will happen, but who knows when.
Yeah.
You could be the one to do it.
Oh, I wish. I mean, I don't have all of the money or all of the expertise. Bro
um,
wanted to like to follow the footsteps on this short story and to bring it. I mean, it will be difficult to link it, you know, and
yeah.
to because as you said before, we have now a different way of watching a film, or to have different, I don't know, visuals from the film
That's
that.
right, but that doesn't mean if you made something, you would have to follow that.
I know, but let's say that I will make a movie up from
Right.
this. I will have to do something that people will definitely understand. If I'm going to do something that they will not understand, then why would I have done this in the first place?
Well,
Because
I
you.
would, whenever I do anything, I'm just interested in a few people understanding it. If a few people can understand it, if in principle it can be understood, I'm not worried about a large audience. I'm more interested in a few people getting it.
Of course, but the thing is that if you're doing it like for, let's say, for your entertainment only, and if you're not spending that much, but if you want to really spend lots of money in a movie
Uh,
and
yeah,
try.
then I would suggest you add a bunch of gore effects and probably a beautiful actress that exposes her breasts. That's what I would suggest for success.
That was for the 80s movies.
Yeah, well, I think it would still be successful.
Yeah, I mean that you need the mark of success to add to the movie to be able to get it. I mean, to have to be successful. I wonder. I mean, I really wonder if someone will actually try to get this done. I mean, I will definitely be up to look at this movie, for this new movie, by the way, if it was.
Maybe a more faithful representation of the story.
Mm-mm.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it seems we've run out of things to say about this chapter of the story, so
I think
should we
so.
wrap it up?
Yeah, I think so. We should. Well, thank you for everyone that has been staying up to here. We are definitely enjoying our time by reading these chapters from H.P. Lovecraft. The name of the short story, by the way, is Reanimator, Herbert West Reanimator. So I have already put the link in the chat. So if someone wants to go and read it, or you can actually search for it online, it's available, it's public, it's for public use, so you can go ahead and read it. If you have any other suggestion or comment, just do it in the description, in the comment section as well. We are going to keep on going, and we're going to keep on reading and discussing H.P. Lovecraft's short story. So, you have anything else to say, Nicholas?
No, thanks for having me. 3 down, 3 to go.
Three to go, and we're really interested to see what's going on, especially on that monster. I'm still debating what's going to happen, but thanks anyways. Thanks, Nicholas, for being here, and thank you for everyone that is going to be watching this later on. So I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope to see you guys soon.